Hi, it's Scott Allen from Green and Gold Rugby. This is part 2 of my video looking at the Wallabies and Lions scrum battle. The accompanying article on Green and Gold Rugby gives you a lot more detail, so be sure to check that out. First, I want to look at the vertical angles. As I detail in the article, a loose head is trying to get the back of his head underneath the sternum of the tight head so he can lift him up slightly, destabilise him and then drive him backwards. Due to the natural offset of the scrum, the loose head is lining up outside the tight head. To get underneath his sternum, he needs to angle across. So you'll find that most loose heads start angled in towards the tight head, and then on engage, drive through on the same angle. Here's an example from a match between the Wallabies and Wales, and you can see that Gethin Jenkins and James Slipper are both angled in to get underneath the tight head. And then as they engage and keep pushing, they keep working those angles. Here's an example with the Wallabies playing the Springboks, and you can see that both Kepu and Steenkamp are angled in, so their head's going to go directly underneath the sternum of the tight head. This next example, from a match between England and Wales, doesn't have so much of an angle. You can still see that Corbisiero on the loose head side for England is angled in slightly underneath Adam Jones. The reason there's not as much angle in this scrum is because they've set up head to head. Now by rights this is a Welsh scrum feed. They set the mark. England should have offset from them, but they don't. And as a result, the loose heads didn't have to angle in as much to still get their heads in the same position. Now because the loose head's angling in, they're crowding the tight head and taking space away that he wants to put his head in. So quite often you'll see the loose head and tight head arguing about a head-to-head clash, and the referee sometimes has to pull it up to sort it out. This issue is caused by the loose head. The tight head wants the loose head to move the head back out so he's got room, and the loose head is trying to force the tight head in. Here's an example with the Wallaby loose head Ben Robinson clashing with the Springbok tight head, trying to push his head back in before they engage so that he can gain an advantage. Is it illegal for the loose head to angle in like this? Yes, it is, but let's not kid ourselves. There are lots of things that happen in scrums that aren't legal. It's a matter of understanding what's going on so you can deal with it. Now let's look at some of the scrums from the second test between the Wallabies and the Lions to get an understanding of what was going on there. Ben Robinson's been doing a good job in this series of containing Adam Jones, and I think that's the best he's going to achieve. Jones is that good. As you can see here, Robinson dives down underneath Jones. He'll then try to stand back up and lift Jones up and disrupt him, but Jones is a strong guy. He's a very good tight head. He controls Robinson to the point where I think you'd have to call this scrum even on that side until the scrum goes down and the referee orders a reset. From the reset, the Wallabies were awarded a free kick and they opted to take the scrum option, from which they eventually got a penalty against Vunipola. You can see here it's set up. Alexander's in a better position than some of the other examples I've shown you. He's flexed his knees a little bit more, that brings his hips down lower, and his hips are at the same height as his shoulders. Vunipola's in a reasonable shape as well, but I think he's sitting back on his heels a little bit, and that probably contributes to the fact that he misses the hit, as we'll see as we roll the footage on. Alexander gets well past the centre line, Vunipola's hips don't go forward, and as a result he doesn't meet Alexander, and he's the one that causes that scrum to go down. Here's another scrum later in the match, and this time Vunipola gets over Alexander. Alexander's setup position isn't bad. The difference here is that Vunipola doesn't miss the hit, and he's able to meet Alexander at the centre line so they're on even terms. When Alexander plays tight head and the loose head opposite him manages to meet him on even terms at the engage, Alexander is vulnerable. There was a really good drive coming through behind Vunipola from the Lions' middle row, and the Wallabies were lucky to get away with that scrum. The scrum battle in this match really ebbed and flowed. Here Alexander's setup position isn't as good. He's starting to straighten those legs, and the shoulders are coming down below the hips. But again, Vunipola's really poor on the engage and nearly misses the hit. At this point, both packs are pushing square, and neither side's going anywhere. It's at this stage that Vunipola turns in and tries to drive across Alexander. Gilbert saw what was going on here and correctly penalised Vunipola. Now there were other scrums in the match where Vunipola gets his head outside of Alexander's chest, and you then see him driving across Alexander. You can see here that Alexander had let go of his bind, throws the hand up in the air. I'm sure he's signalling to the referee, trying to indicate that it's Vunipola who should be penalised here. But Gilbert actually penalised Alexander for releasing his bind and standing up. Now that decision may not make sense unless you look at what was happening before that decision and a couple of others were made. The Wallabies were deliberately angling across the scrum towards the tight head side for the Lions. With Alexander moving away from Vunipola, he had nothing to push on, and that's what caused him to stand up. Later in the match, Vunipola worked out, or was told, what to do to counter this tactic, and that is, follow Alexander. That made it look like Vunipola was boring in, but he was just following Alexander. Make no mistake, the Wallabies were first offenders with this tactic, and Joubert's a good enough referee that he worked it out and correctly penalised them. Yes, it's another illegal tactic. Does it happen in other matches with other packs? Yes, it does. Here's an example, England v Wales, and you'll see that the English pack engage and then drive straight across again at Jones. They're doing this to make it hard for the loose head to have anything to push on, but also to add extra weight to nullify Jones on the tight head side. The Lions have selected Alex Corbisiero in place of Vunipola to start loose head this week. He's a more experienced scrummager and he's a very strong guy. He's got some technical problems, but he uses his strength to recover. Here are some examples of him scrummaging against the All Blacks last year. You can see here he's gone backwards on the hit, but then he's strong enough to drive back through Franks. Again, in this example, Franks gets a slight advantage at the hit, and you'll see that Corbisiero actually has to take a step backwards, but then he's strong enough to stabilise the scrum so that Franks can't keep coming through him. Here on the overhead shot, he wins the hit and drives through Franks. So he is a strong scrummager, but he can be inconsistent, and that's what he's been on this Lions tour. Let's have a look at some examples. Whilst he scrummaged well against New Zealand last year, you can see here that Franks actually gets lower than him and is able to drive through him. And in this example, again, Franks gets really low, particularly after the engage. That causes Corbisiero to hinge. He's strong enough to stay on his feet, but Franks got the advantage over him. In this example against Adam Jones, he misses the hit, and Jones is scrummaging quite low, causes Corbisiero to hinge. Scrum went down and it was a reset. Now on the reset, even though his engage is not good, he doesn't move forward. He's strong enough to hold Jones. Here against France, his engage isn't good and he gets caught a little bit high, and as a result, the England scrum starts to go backwards. In this example against France, he goes back initially because his engage isn't great, but then he's strong enough, as you can see, to hold that side of the scrum back up. And again, even though he goes back initially, he's then strong enough to actually start driving back through and moves the English scrum forward. Corbisiero wasn't initially selected on the Lions tour, he was called in as a replacement. Since he's been on tour, again his performance has been a little bit inconsistent. Here against country, you'll see that an inexperienced tight head gets low and actually drives him backwards. Again here, with the country tight head scrummaging low enough, he's able to hold Corbisiero. And you'll see that that's a real key against Corbisiero. How low can the tight head get? As I said, the performance has been inconsistent, so even though the tight head's low here, Corbisiero's strong enough to actually push back through him. In this scrum against the Brumbies, he was very strong and completely dominated it. In the first test match, I thought he got the better of Alexander overall on the night. We've seen this scrum a number of times. Obviously, it's the one where the Wallabies pack was going backwards on roller skate, and that was some poor scrummaging from Alexander. In this scrum, you'll see Alexander's in a dreadful starting position. Legs are nearly straight, shoulders below the hips, but Corbisiero actually misses the hit. That gives Alexander the space and time he needs to correct his position by bringing his feet forward. Corbisiero hinged, and that's what took the scrum down. I think the battle between Alexander and Corbisiero will decide the scrum outcome in the third test. Alexander has to get low, and he has to try and beat Corbisiero to the hit, even if that means he has to take a risk early in the match and throw Corbisiero's timing off by going a little early. We know Alexander can get low, and when he engages well, like we see in this example here, he can be a good scrummager, but he's going to have to be at the top of his game on Saturday night.